I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Pamela Walker, and at 64 years old, I never imagined I'd find myself trapped in my own life. But looking back, I suppose the warning signs had been there all along. I just didn't want to see them. My story begins in a modest 2-story house on Maple Street where I've lived for the past 43 years. The blue shutters need repainting and the porch creaks in 3 different places, but every corner holds memories that money simply can't buy. It was in this house that I raised my son Jacob after my husband Richard died in a construction accident 26 years ago. One minute we were planning our anniversary dinner. The next I was a 38-year-old widow with an 8-year-old son and a mortgage I couldn't afford. That first night alone, after I'd finally gotten Jacob to sleep, I sat at our kitchen table and cried until there were no tears left. The moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating Richard's coffee mug still sitting where he'd left it that morning. I remember thinking, this is impossible. I can't do this alone. But when morning came, I got up anyway. What choice did I have? I still remember Jacob's small face looking up at me over his cereal bowl. Are we going to be okay, Mom? He asked, his voice so small. Yes, I told him, with more confidence than I felt. We're going to be just fine. And somehow, we were. I took a job waiting tables at Morrison's Diner during the day while Jacob was at school. The pay was barely minimum wage, but the regulars tipped well, especially Mr. and Henderson, who came in every morning for black coffee and wheat toast. But it wasn't enough. Not for the mortgage, not for groceries, not for the growing boy who needed new shoes every 4 months. So after Jacob went to bed, I would pull out my old sewing machine, a wedding present from Richard's mother, and work by lamplight, mending clothes for neighbors or altering department store dresses for women who could afford to shop at places I only walked past. It started with small jobs. Mrs. Cooper from down the street needed her daughter's prom dress hemmed. Mrs. Slarson wanted her husband's suits taken in after he lost weight. Word spread slowly through our middle-class neighborhood that I was reliable and my prices were fair. Then came the Thursday evening that changed everything. The doorbell rang just after 7. Jacob was upstairs struggling through math homework, and I was trying to make 1 pound of ground beef stretch into a meal that would also provide leftovers for tomorrow's lunch. When I opened the door, I found Elizabeth Caldwell standing on my porch, clutching a garment bag and looking distinctly uncomfortable. Mrs. Caldwell lived in Riverside Heights, the affluent neighborhood across town where houses had 3-car garages and in-ground swimming pools. I recognized her from the country club where I occasionally worked catering events. Mrs. Walker, she said, her voice tight with anxiety. Margaret Holloway gave me your address. She said you're good with alterations. I nodded, wiping my hands on my apron. I do some sewing. Yes. How can I help you? It's my daughter's wedding dress, she said, unzipping the garment bag to reveal the most exquisite gown I'd ever seen. Ivory silk with delicate beading that must have taken hundreds of hours of handwork. The seamstress who was supposed to alter it had a family emergency, and the wedding is in 2 weeks. Margaret said you might be able to help. I invited her in, conscious of my worn furniture and the faded wallpaper in the hallway. Mrs. Caldwell perched on the edge of my sofa as if afraid to fully commit her weight to it. When she removed the gown completely, I could see the problem immediately. The bodice needed to be entirely reconstructed to fit her daughter's frame. It would require taking apart the beadwork and then reapplying it, a painstaking process that normally took weeks. "Can you do it?" she asked, doubt evident in her expression as she glanced around my modest living room. I ran my fingers over the silk, feeling the quality. "Yes," I said with quiet confidence. "I can do it, but it will be challenging given the time frame." "How much?" she asked, reaching for her checkbook. I hesitated, mentally calculating the hours. Normally I would charge $200 for complex alterations, but this would take at least 14 hours of detailed work. $400, I said, and Daisy said, my heart pounding at naming such a high figure. Mrs. Caldwell didn't even blink. "That's very reasonable," she said, writing the check immediately. "When can it be ready for a fitting?" As she left, she handed me her card. "Call me if you have any questions. And thank you, Mrs. Walker. Margaret said you were the only one who could save this situation. I stayed up until 3 in the morning that night, carefully removing each tiny bead and marking its position. For the next 2 weeks, every moment Jacob was at school or asleep, I was working on that dress. My fingers bled from pushing needles through the thick seams. My eyes burned from focusing on the intricate beadwork under the yellow light of my sewing lamp. When Mrs. Caldwell returned with her daughter for the final fitting, the girl gasped when she saw herself in the mirror. The dress now fit her perfectly, showcasing her slender waist and elegant shoulders. The beadwork caught the light as she turned, sending prisms dancing across my living room walls. "This is extraordinary," Mrs. Caldwell whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." "The payment is thanks enough," I said, though in truth, I had taken pride in the work itself. There was something deeply satisfying about transforming something beautiful into something perfect. As they were leaving, Mrs. Caldwell pressed something into my hand. It was another check, this one for $200. "A bonus," she said firmly when I tried to protest. "And I'll be telling everyone I know about your work." True to her word, within a month my phone was ringing with requests from women in Riverside Heights. Evening gowns for charity galas, custom suits for business executives, wedding dresses for daughters of prominent families. I was no longer just doing alterations. I was creating custom pieces for clients who could afford to pay whatever I asked. But I kept my growing success quiet. I still worked at Morrison's Diner during the day. I still lived in the same house with the creaking porch. I still drove the same 10-year-old sedan. The only visible change was that Jacob never had to wear hand-me-downs again, and when he was accepted to State University, I was able to write a check for his tuition without taking out loans. "How did you save so much on a waitress's salary?" he asked me once, confusion creasing his young face. "I've been putting away a little each month," I told him. It wasn't exactly a lie. I watched my son thrive at university. He studied business and economics, made good friends, and called me every Sunday without fail. He would come home for holidays, filling our house with stories of his classes and his dreams for the future. When he graduated with honors, I sat in the audience with tears of pride streaming down my face. Those were good years, years when I felt the weight of Richard's absence less acutely, years when I began to believe that despite everything, I had done right by our son. Then Jacob met Lily Foster. Lily was undeniably beautiful, with the kind of polished sophistication that comes from money and privilege. Tall, with honey blonde hair always styled in perfect waves. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. She had graduated from an exclusive private college with a marketing degree and worked for her father's advertising firm. Jacob brought her home on a Sunday afternoon in October. I had spent the morning making his favorite pot roast and apple pie. At 34, my son was a handsome man with his father's height and my stubborn chin. The pride I felt watching him walk through my door never diminished, even after all these years. "Mom, this is Lily," he said, his face alight with the particular glow of new love. "Lily, this is my mother, Pamela." Lily's smile was practiced perfection. "Mrs. Walker, I've heard so much about you." She handed me a bottle of wine that probably cost more than I made in tips in a week. As I thanked her, I caught the slight flicker in her eyes as she glanced around my living room, taking in the worn sofa and the faded curtains. It was the same look Elizabeth Caldwell had given me all those years ago, except without the desperate need for my services to temper it. "Jacob tells me you work at a diner," she said as we sat down to dinner. "That must be interesting." "Mom's been at Morrison's for over 20 years, Jacob said proudly. "Everyone in town knows her." "How charming," Lily replied, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "My mother sits on the board of 3 different charities. She says staying busy is important at any age." The implication was clear. Waiting tables was beneath someone who could be doing more prestigious work. I merely smiled and passed the potatoes. Throughout dinner, Lily dominated the conversation with stories about her family's vacation home in the Hamptons, her father's connections in New York, and the charity gala she was helping to organize. I noticed she rarely asked Jacob questions about his thoughts or opinions, and when she did, she often answered for him. "We're thinking of buying a condo downtown," she announced over dessert. "Jacob's apartment is just too small for entertaining properly." "We are—" Jacob looked surprised, but Lily squeezed his hand. "Well, we've discussed it, sweetheart. Remember?" He nodded, though I could tell by the crease between his eyebrows that this was news to him. After dinner, while Jacob was helping me with the dishes, Lily excused herself to use the bathroom. She was gone for nearly 15 minutes. "She seems ambitious," I said carefully to Jacob, not wanting to dampen his obvious enthusiasm. "She's amazing, Mom," he said, his eyes lighting up. "She knows exactly what she wants and goes after it. Her father's company is going to offer me a position in their finance department. Better salary, better benefits than what I have now." I dried a plate slowly, choosing my words. "As long as it's what you want too, honey." "Of course it is," he said, but there was a slight defensiveness in his tone that hadn't been there before. After they left, I was tidying up when I noticed Lily's expensive handbag sitting on the chair in the hallway. I picked it up, intending to call Jacob so he could come back for it, when several papers slipped out onto the floor. As I gathered them, a familiar name caught my eye. My name, Pamela Walker. It was a printout of property records for my house, along with what appeared to be a credit check. There was also a handwritten note with questions: financial status, savings, retirement plan, life insurance. My hands trembled as I quickly stuffed everything back into her bag. Why would Lily be investigating my finances? An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach as I placed the bag by the door. When Jacob came back for it 20 minutes later, I said nothing about what I'd seen. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation. Perhaps I was overreacting. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Lily hadn't looked at Jacob the way a woman in love should look at a man. She'd looked at him the way a prospector might look at a promising claim. 6 months later, they were engaged. The ring on Lily's finger featured a diamond so large it seemed to weigh down her hand. "It's beautiful," I said, admiring it over coffee in my kitchen. "Jacob must have saved for months." "Oh, Daddy helped," Lily said dismissively. "He wanted me to have something suitable." She twisted the ring so the diamond caught the light. "Speaking of suitable, we were thinking of having the wedding at the Oakmont Country Club. June is booking quickly, so we need to place deposits soon." I nodded, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. Jacob had mentioned they might want a small ceremony in the garden of Lily's parents' home. Apparently, plans had changed. "That sounds lovely," I said. "Just let me know what portion of the costs I can help with." Lily's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's sweet, Pamela, but Daddy's taking care of everything. We wouldn't want to burden you." Her words were considerate, but her tone made it clear my financial contribution wouldn't be significant enough to matter. The wedding was indeed held at the Oakmont Country Club the following June. It was an elaborate affair with 300 guests, most of whom I didn't know. Lily's mother, Catherine, a thin woman with impermanently pinched expression, had orchestrated every detail down to the exact shade of blue in the hydrangea centerpieces. I wore a navy dress I had made myself, simple but elegant, with pearl buttons down the back. As mother of the groom, I was seated at the main table, but somehow my place card ended up at the furthest end, next to Lily's great-aunt, who was hard of hearing and spoke only to ask when dinner would be served. During the reception, I watched Jacob dancing with his new wife, his face flushed with happiness. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, every inch the successful young businessman Lily and her family expected him to be. I told myself that as long as he was happy, nothing else mattered. But as the evening wore on, I noticed how Lily guided his conversations, steering him away from certain guests and toward others. How she laughed a little too loudly at jokes made by her father's business associates. How she seemed to be presenting Jacob like a prize she had won. "Your son has married well," said a voice beside me. I turned to find Elizabeth Caldwell, my first client from Riverside Heights, sipping champagne. "Yes," I agreed. "Lily comes from a good family." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "I meant Lily has married well. Your son is a catch. Pamela, smart, kind, well-raised." She leaned closer. "Just make sure he doesn't lose those qualities. Some women have a way of reshaping men to fit their ambitions." Before I could respond, She was called away by her husband, but her words stayed with me long after the wedding was over. For the first year after the wedding, things seemed relatively normal. Jacob and Lily came for dinner once a month. They called on holidays. Lily was polite if somewhat distant. I told myself that all new marriages need time to find their rhythm, and mother-in-law relationships are notoriously complicated. Then the requests began. "Mom, I hate to ask this," Jacob said over the phone one Tuesday evening, almost 18 months after the wedding. "But Lily and I found this perfect house in Lakeside Estates. The thing is, we're a bit short on the down payment. I was wondering if you might be able to help out just a loan until my next bonus." I hesitated. Lakeside Estates was one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, with homes starting at 7 figures. "How much are you short, honey?" I asked. There was a pause. 30,000. My breath caught. It was a substantial amount, but not impossible. I had been saving diligently for years, building my nest egg through my increasingly lucrative sewing business. "Let me see what I can do," I said carefully. 2 days later, I wrote a check from my savings account, not the primary one Jacob knew about, but my separate business account. I made sure the amount wouldn't raise questions about how a diner waitress could have such savings. Jacob was effusive in his gratitude when I handed him the check over dinner at my house. Lily was notably absent, having a previous engagement with her mother. "We'll pay you back as soon as we can, Mom, I promise." But the repayment never came. Instead, 3 months later, there was another request. "Lily's car broke down completely," Jacob explained, sounding stressed. "The repair bill is more than the car is worth, and with the new house expenses, we're stretched thin. Could you help us out just until things stabilize?" Another check, this time for $15,000. Then it was unexpected medical bills. Then it was renovations for the new house. Then it was an investment opportunity that couldn't be missed. Each time, Jacob sounded more strained, less like himself. Each time. Lily was conveniently absent when money changed hands, and each time, I wrote the check without complaint, telling myself I was helping my son build his new life. But as the requests increased, my time with Jacob decreased. Our Sunday phone calls became monthly, then sporadic. Family dinners were rescheduled, then canceled altogether. "Lily's so busy with her charity work," Jacob would explain. "And her parents expect us at their place every other weekend. When I did see him, I was alarmed by the changes. My once robust son had lost weight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His clothes, though expensive, hung loosely on his frame. More concerning was the change in his demeanor, the confidence replaced by a nervous deference, especially when Lily was present. Then came the Christmas that truly opened my eyes. I had invited them for Christmas Eve dinner, as was our tradition. To my surprise, they accepted. I spent days preparing, making Jacob's favorite foods and decorating the house with the ornaments he had made as a child. They arrived an hour late. Lily immediately complained about the cold, the neighborhood, the difficulty in finding parking. Jacob hovered nervously, rushing to take her coat, pouring her wine, constantly checking her expression for signs of displeasure. "This is quaint," Lily said, looking around my living room at the decorations. "So traditional." I served dinner, watching as Jacob picked at his food, his eyes constantly darting to Lily as if seeking approval. When it came time for gifts, I handed Jacob the sweater I had knitted for him, a tradition since his first Christmas without his father. As he opened it, a genuine smile spread across his face, the first I'd seen all evening. "Thanks, Mom. It's perfect," he said, holding it up. It was a deep blue that matched his eyes, with a complex cable pattern I'd spent months perfecting. Lily made a small noise that might have been a laugh. "Oh, Jacob, you're not going to wear that, are you?" "It's so homemade." The light in Jacob's eyes dimmed. He carefully folded the sweater and set it aside. "It's nice for around the house," he said quietly. I felt something crack inside me. This wasn't just a dismissive daughter-in-law. This was something more insidious. She was systematically erasing everything about Jacob that didn't fit her vision, including his relationship with me. After they left, I sat in my quiet house, the Christmas tree lights blinking in the darkness, and admitted to myself what I had been avoiding for over 2 years. Lily wasn't just changing Jacob. She was isolating him, controlling him, using him, and I had been enabling it with every check I wrote. 3 months later, they stopped by unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. I was in my sewing room working on a gown for the governor's wife, a client who paid exceptionally well for my discretion as much as my skill. I quickly covered the dress and went downstairs. Lily's sleek car sat in my driveway like an alien spacecraft that had landed in the wrong neighborhood. When I opened the door, Jacob stood on the porch looking uncomfortable. Lily stood slightly behind him, her designer sunglasses perched on her perfect hair, her expression unreadable. "Mom, we need to talk to you about something important," Jacob said, his voice strained. I invited them in, my stomach knotting with apprehension. They sat side by side on my sofa, Jacob perched on the edge as if ready to flee, Lily lounging with practiced ease. "We're concerned about you, Pamela," Lily began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Living alone in this big house at your age? It's not safe." "I'm only 64, I reminded her. "And I've lived here quite safely for 43 years. "But you're getting older," she pressed. "Jacob told me about the incident with the stove last month." I frowned, glancing at Jacob, who wouldn't meet my eyes. There had been no incident with the stove. I had been cooking for over 50 years without burning down a single kitchen. "I don't recall any problem with my stove," I said carefully. See, Lily turned to Jacob. "Memory issues too. This is exactly what I was talking about." Jacob shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we just think maybe it's time to consider other options. For your safety." "What options?" I asked, though I already suspected where this was heading. Lily's smile widened. "We found a lovely assisted living facility, Evergreen Meadows. They have activities, people your own age. And the best part is, if we sell this house, there would be more than enough to cover the costs for years." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about my house, my last major asset that they hadn't yet tapped into. "I'm not interested in assisted living," I said firmly. "This is my home." Lily's smile hardened. "It's not really about what you want anymore, is it? It's about what's best for you. What's safest." Jacob finally looked at me, his expression torn. "Mom, please, just think about it. We're worried about you." But I could see in his eyes that "we" didn't include him. This was Lily's plan, and he was simply the messenger. "I'll think about it," I sassy said, wanting them to leave so I could process what was happening. Lily seemed satisfied with this small victory. As they were leaving, she paused in the doorway. "We've made an appointment at First National Bank for Tuesday at 10:30, she informed me. "To discuss the financial arrangements. Jacob will pick you up." And that was how, 4 days later, I found myself sitting in a leather chair at First National Bank, squeezed between my son and his wife, feeling like a prisoner in my own life. The leather chair felt uncomfortable beneath me as I clutched my worn purse, the same one I'd carried for 15 years. The sterile air of First National Bank mixed with Lily's overpowering perfume, making it hard to breathe. Jacob sat to my right, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. When had my baby boy become this stranger, Mrs. Walker? The account manager, Mr. Peterson, said as he slid a stack of papers across the mahogany desk. "These are the documents your family requested. Transfer of property ownership, power of attorney, and liquidation of your savings account." I stared at the papers, the words blurring together. 43 years I'd lived in that house. 43 years of memories of raising Jacob as a single mother after Richard died. Every corner of that house held pieces of our life together. Lily's manicured fingers drummed impatiently on the desk. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect bun that made her look like she was ready for a board meeting. "Pamela," she said, her voice saccharine sweet, but with an edge that made my skin crawl. "We've been over this. You can't take care of yourself anymore. You forgot to turn off the stove last week. That was a lie, and we all knew it." But Lily had a way of twisting every small mistake, every moment of forgetfulness that comes with age, into evidence that I was incompetent. "Mom," Jacob finally spoke, his voice strained. This is for your own good. Lily found a nice assisted living facility. They have activities. Other people your age. I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he become so thin, so tired looking? The circles under his eyes were darker than usual, and his hands shook slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. Lily had him on such a tight leash that he barely resembled the confident young man who used to call me every Sunday just to hear how my week went. "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly. Lily's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that only I could hear. "Then you can figure out how to live on the streets with the stray dogs, old woman. Because you won't be living in that house anymore either way." My heart stopped. The cruelty in her voice, the complete lack of humanity hit me like a physical blow. I glanced at Jacob, hoping he would defend me, say something, anything, but he just stared at his hands. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Lily," I whispered, "that house is all I have left of Richard. It's where I raised Jacob. Surely we can work something out." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Work something out, Pamela. You're living in the past. That house is worth $350,000. Do you know what Jacob and I could do with that money? We have plans, dreams. You're just holding us back." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break exactly, but crack, like the first fissure in a dam that's been holding back a flood for too long. I thought about all the times I'd slipped Jacob money when he and Lily were struggling to pay their bills. All the holidays I'd spent alone because they were too busy with Lily's family. "Mr. Peterson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Walker, I need to inform you that once you sign these documents, the transactions will be immediate and irreversible. Are you sure you want to proceed?" I looked at the pen in my trembling hand. Such a small thing to hold such power over my entire life. Then I glanced around the bank, noting the security cameras, the other customers going about their business, oblivious to the little drama playing out at our table. That's when I saw him. A young man in a security uniform watching our table with concern. He'd probably seen this scene before. Elderly people being pressured by family members. His nameplate read David Morgan. And when our eyes met, I saw genuine worry there. "I need a moment," I said, setting the pen down. Lily's eyes flashed with irritation. "We don't have all day. Pamela, Jacob has to get back to work." "Just one moment," I repeated, my voice stronger than it had been all morning. I reached into my purse, past my reading glasses and tissues, to the small notebook I always carried. With shaking hands, I tore out a piece of paper and began to write. My handwriting was still steady, thank God. 40 years of keeping meticulous household records had kept my penmanship neat and clear. "Help me," I wrote. "I'm being forced to sign these papers. Not safe. Please call Detective Rebecca Santos. Precinct 12. Tell her Pamela Walker needs help. I have information about financial elder abuse." I folded the paper carefully, then stood up slowly, using my cane for support. "I need to use the restroom," I announced. Lily's eyes narrowed. "I'll come with you." "I'm 64, not 6, I said with more backbone than I'd shown in months. "I think I can manage." As I walked past the security guard station, I stumbled slightly, dropping my purse. David immediately rushed to help me. And as he handed me my belongings, I pressed the folded paper into his palm. "Thank you, dear," I said loudly enough for Lily to hear. Young people are so helpful these days. When I returned to the table, Lily was tapping her foot impatiently. "Are you ready now? We have appointments this afternoon." I sat down slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. Through the glass windows of the bank, I could see David on his phone, speaking quietly but urgently. Good. The wheels were in motion. "I'm ready," I said, picking up the pen again. But I wasn't ready to sign their papers. I was ready for something else entirely, something they would never see coming. Because Lily had made one crucial mistake in all her planning and scheming. She had underestimated me. As I held that pen, I thought about the safety deposit box they knew nothing about, the one I'd had for 22 years, filled with documents they'd never seen, the secret that would change everything. I looked at my son one more time, memorizing his face, wondering if this would be the last time I saw him as my boy instead of her puppet. Then I smiled. "Actually," I said, setting the pen down again, "I think there's something you both need to know first." The silence that followed my words was deafening. Lily's perfectly manicured fingers stopped drumming on the desk, and Jacob finally looked up from his hands, confusion flickering across his tired features. Mr. Peterson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, probably wondering if he should call for additional security. But I wasn't ready to reveal everything yet. Not here. Not like this. Some stories need the right setting, the right moment. So instead, I smiled again and said, "I think we should discuss this at home where we can talk privately." Lily's eyes flashed with fury. "Pamela, we are not leaving this bank until those papers are signed. Do you understand me?" For the first time in 3 years since Lily had wormed her way into our family, I felt a spark of my old self. The woman who had raised a son alone after my husband Richard died in that construction accident. The woman who had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and ensure Jacob could go to college. The woman who had built something from nothing. "My dear," I said, my voice calm but carrying a steel that surprised even me. "I understand perfectly. The question is, do you, 26 years ago, when Richard died, I thought my world had ended. Jacob was only 8 years old, clutching my skirt as we stood beside his father's grave, both of us crying so hard we could barely breathe. I remember thinking I had nothing left to give, no strength left to carry on. But I was wrong. I had everything to give. And I found strength I never knew existed. I worked at Morrison's Diner during the day, serving coffee and pie to truckers and businessmen who barely looked at me. At night, I cleaned offices downtown, mopping floors and emptying trash cans while Jacob slept. On weekends, I took in sewing, mending clothes and altering dresses for the wealthy women in Riverside Heights. Those women would come to my little house with their expensive fabrics and designer labels, looking down their noses at my worn furniture and faded wallpaper. But they needed me. Their husbands' business dinners, their charity galas, their daughters' debutante balls, they all required the kind of delicate handwork that only someone like me could provide. Elizabeth Caldwell was the first. She arrived at my door one rainy Thursday evening in October of 1998, carrying a designer gown that needed extensive alterations. Her daughter was getting married, and the original seamstress had botched the job. "I don't usually come to this part of town," she'd said, looking around my small living room with barely concealed distaste. "But Margaret Holloway said you were the only one who could fix this." I spent 14 hours on that dress, working by lamplight after Jacob went to bed, my fingers aching from the intricate beadwork. When Elizabeth came to collect it, she stared at the transformation in amazement. "This is extraordinary," she whispered, running her fingers along the perfectly aligned seams. "How much do I owe you?" I had planned to charge $200, but something in her expression told me I was undervaluing my work. $400, I said, my heart hammering. She didn't even blink. "Do you have a card I'm going to recommend you to everyone I know?" That was the beginning. Word spread through the wealthy neighborhoods like wildfire. Pamela Walker, the seamstress who could work miracles with needle and thread. Soon I had more work than I could handle. Evening gowns for society parties, wedding dresses for prominent families, custom suits for business tycoons. But I was careful, always careful. I never flaunted my growing success, never moved from my modest house, never changed my simple lifestyle. Jacob knew I was working more, making more money. But he was a child focused on school and friends and growing up. He didn't ask questions about the expensive fabrics I brought home or the late nights I spent hunched over my sewing machine. By the time he graduated high school, I had saved enough to pay for his college education outright. No student loans, no financial stress. When he asked how I'd managed it on a diner waitress's salary, I told him I'd been putting away a little money each month for years. It wasn't exactly a lie. I watched him flourish at State University, studying business and economics, making friends, discovering who he wanted to become. Those were good years. He would call me every Sunday, full of stories about his classes and professors. He brought friends home for holidays, and our little house was full of laughter again. Then he met Lily. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Tall and blonde with the kind of polished sophistication that comes from money and privilege. She had graduated from a private college with a degree in marketing and worked for her father's advertising firm. When Jacob first brought her home, I wanted to like her. I really did. But there were signs. Small things at first. The way she looked around our house with that same expression Elizabeth Caldwell had worn years earlier. The way she steered conversations away from my work as if being a seamstress was somehow embarrassing. The way she gradually convinced Jacob that Sunday phone calls were childish and that he needed to focus on building his career. Your mother is very traditional. I overheard her tell him one evening when they thought I was in the kitchen. But you're going places. Jake, you can't let family obligations hold you back. Family obligations. That's what I had become to my own son. The wedding was small and elegant, held at Lily's parents' country club. I wore a dress I had made myself, navy blue with simple pearl buttons. Appropriate but not attention-grabbing. I watched my boy dance with his new wife and told myself that this was what happiness looked like. For the first year, things seemed normal. They visited occasionally, called on holidays. Lily was polite but distant, and I convinced myself that was just her personality. Some people take time to warm up, but then the requests started. Mom, we're looking at houses, and we found this perfect place, but we need help with the down payment. Mom, Lily's car broke down and the repair bill is more than we expected. Mom, I know you don't spend much on yourself. Could you help us out just this once? Each time I said yes. Each time I transferred money from my carefully hidden savings account to help my son and his wife. Not too much at once. Never enough to raise questions about where it was coming from. Just a mother helping her family the way mothers do. Except there were no grandchildren. We're not ready yet, Lily would say whenever I brought it up. Maybe in a few years when we're more established. The years passed. Jacob's visits became less frequent, his phone calls shorter. When I saw him, he looked tired, stressed, older than his years. He'd lost weight, and there was something defeated in his posture that broke my heart. Meanwhile, my sewing business continued to grow. The wealthy ladies of Riverside Heights couldn't get enough of my work. I was booked months in advance, working on gowns that cost more than most people made in a year. My bank account, the one Jacob and Lily knew nothing about, steadily grew. But I was lonely. So terribly lonely. The house that had once been filled with my son's laughter now echoed with silence. I ate dinner alone, watched television alone, celebrated holidays alone because Jacob and Lily were always too busy with her family. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Mom, Jacob's voice was strained, urgent. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. How much money do you have saved? I almost choked on my tea. Jacob, why would you ask that? Lily thinks you're sitting on a lot more money than you let on. She says no waitress could afford to help us as much as you have over the years. My blood ran cold. Lily suspected. Somehow she had started putting the pieces together. Honey, I've just been careful with money. You know how I am about saving. I know, but Mom. He paused, and I could hear her voice in the background, sharp and insistent. Lily thinks you should move in with us. You're getting older, and this house is too big for one person. We could sell it and use the money to buy something bigger. Somewhere we could all live together. Together like one big happy family. Except I knew what it really meant. They wanted my house, my savings, my independence. They wanted everything I had worked so hard to build. I'll think about it, I said, but I was already planning. That night, I went to my bedroom closet and moved aside the old winter coats I never wore anymore. Behind them, built into the wall and hidden by a false panel Richard had installed years ago, was my safe. Inside were documents that would change everything. Bank statements showing the true extent of my wealth, contracts with my exclusive clients, evidence of a life Lily had no idea existed. For 3 years, I had let them chip away at my dignity, my independence, my relationship with my son. I had played the role of the helpless old woman because it was easier than fighting, because I loved Jacob too much to force him to choose. But now, sitting in this bank with Lily's ultimatum ringing in my ears, I realized that love sometimes means fighting for what's right. I thought about Mrs. Chen, who had paid me $15,000 for her daughter's wedding trousseau last month. About the Weatherby family, who commissioned me to create an entire wardrobe for their daughter's debutante season. About all the wealthy women who trusted me with their most precious occasions and paid me accordingly. Lily thought she knew who I was, a poor old woman clinging to a house she couldn't afford, surviving on Social Security and handouts from her son. She had no idea she was sitting across from one of the most sought-after couturiers in the state. But she was about to find out. The ride home from this bank was suffocating. Lily drove my car, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel, while Jacob sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. I was relegated to the back seat like a child being driven to school. The silence was thick with Lily's barely contained fury. "I don't know what game you're playing, Pamela," she finally said as we pulled into my driveway. "But it stops now. We're going inside. You're going to explain this mysterious something we need to know. And then we're going back to that bank to finish what we started." I said nothing as we walked up the familiar path to my front door. The roses Richard had planted 30 years ago were blooming beautifully, their red petals a stark contrast to the gray tension hanging over us. I fumbled with my keys, partly from genuine nervousness and partly to buy myself time to think. Inside, Lily immediately took charge, as she always did. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to my own couch. "Jacob, make sure she doesn't go anywhere while I make some coffee. We're going to have a long talk." I settled into my favorite armchair instead, the one Richard had bought me for our 15th anniversary. From here, I could see the family photos on the mantel, the ones from happier times, Jacob as a baby, his first day of school, his college graduation. So many memories in this house, so many moments that Lily was trying to price out and sell. When she returned with 3 cups of coffee, her demeanor was deceptively calm. She had changed tactics. I realized the cruel ultimatums weren't working, so now she would try a different approach. "Pamela," she said, settling onto the couch and crossing her legs elegantly, "I think we got off on the wrong foot today. We're all family here. We all want what's best for everyone involved." I took a sip of my coffee, noting that she had used my good china, the set I saved for special occasions. Everything with Lily was about presentation, about creating the right impression. "Jacob told me you wanted to share something with us," she continued. "We're listening." I looked at my son, really studied his face. When had he become so thin? When had those lines appeared around his eyes? He looked exhausted, like a man carrying a weight too heavy for his shoulders. "Jacob," I said softly, "do you remember when you were 12 and wanted that bicycle for Christmas, the red one with the racing stripes?" He blinked, confused by the sudden change of subject. "Mom, what does that have to do with anything? You remember how disappointed you were when Christmas morning came and all the presents under the tree were practical things, clothes and school supplies. But then I told you to look in the garage, and there it was, that beautiful red bicycle, exactly the one you wanted. Do you remember what you asked me?" Jacob's expression softened slightly. I asked how you could afford it. "And what did I tell you?" You said. He paused, the memory clearly coming back to him. "You said, 'Sometimes mothers have their ways.' I've always had my ways, sweetheart." Lily leaned forward, her patience wearing thin. "Pamela, if you have some hidden savings account, now is the time to tell us. We're trying to help you plan for your future." I stood up slowly, using my cane for support. "I think it's time I showed you something." I led them to my bedroom, ignoring Lily's sharp intake of breath at the simple furnishings, the faded wallpaper, the old family photos covering every surface. At my dresser, I picked up a small silver key from my jewelry box. "This," I said, holding up the key, "opens a safety deposit box at Riverside Community Bank." Lily's eyes sharpened like a hawk spotting prey. "What's in the box? Documents, bank statements, records of my real financial situation." The room fell silent except for the tick of the old clock on my nightstand. Jacob looked confused, but Lily's expression was calculating. already trying to figure out how much money we might be talking about. "How much?" she asked bluntly. I walked to my closet and moved aside the winter coats, revealing the hidden panel Richard had built so many years ago, with the small key from my dresser. I opened the safe and withdrew a manila folder. "Sit down," I said, returning to the living room. I opened the folder carefully, spreading the documents across my coffee table like I was laying out a hand of cards. Bank statements from Riverside Community Bank, going back 22 years, account balances, transaction records, investment portfolios. Lily's eyes widened as she scanned the numbers. I watched her face change from confusion to shock to something approaching greed. $847,000, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jacob nearly dropped his coffee cup. "Mom, how is this possible?" I settled back into my chair, feeling strangely calm. The secret I had carried for over 2 decades was finally out in the open. "I've been working," I said simply. "Working where?" Lily demanded. "You work at that diner and they barely pay minimum wage." "I work at the diner, yes, but I also work as a seamstress, a very successful seamstress." I pulled out another set of documents, these showing payments from my clients. Elizabeth Caldwell, $8,000 for her daughter's trousseau, the Weatherby family, $12,000 for a complete debutante wardrobe, Mrs. Chen, $15,000 for her daughter's wedding gown and attendant dresses. "You see," I continued, "the wealthy women in this city, they need someone they can trust, someone discreet, someone who can create one-of-a-kind pieces that cost more than most people make in months." Lily was frantically shuffling through the papers, her fingers trembling. "These payments, some of them are for $20,000, $1,000, $30,000. For sewing, for couture," I corrected. "There's a difference." Jacob was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me—" Before I could answer, Lily slammed her hand down on the coffee table, making the cups rattle. "Because she's been lying to us all this time, letting us think she was poor, letting us help her with money she didn't even need." "I never asked for your help," I said quietly. "But you took it. You took thousands of dollars from us over the years. I took money from my son when he offered it because I didn't want him to feel bad about not being able to provide for his mother. I was protecting his pride." Lily stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, recalculating everything she thought she knew about me. "Well," she said finally, turning to face me with that same cold smile she'd worn at the bank, "this changes everything, doesn't it? We were trying to help a poor old woman, but it turns out you're practically wealthy." She sat back down, her posture different now, more aggressive, more predatory. "Here's what we're going to do," she continued. "You're still moving in with us. This house is still too big for one person, and you're still getting older. But now we know you can afford to contribute properly to the household expenses." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Contribute how?" "Well, $800,000 is a nice nest egg, but it won't last forever. Jacob and I have been talking about starting a business. With your money as startup capital, we could really make something of ourselves." Jacob looked uncomfortable. "Lily, maybe we should think about this." "Think about what?" she snapped. "Your mother has been sitting on a fortune while we've been struggling to make ends meet. The least she can do is help her own family." "I have helped my family," I said. "For 26 years. I've helped my family." Lily's mask was slipping again, revealing the calculating woman underneath. "Not enough. Not nearly enough. Do you know what Jacob could have accomplished with that kind of money? The opportunities we've missed because we didn't know it existed." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to that same threatening whisper she'd used at the bank. "You're going to transfer half that money to Jacob tomorrow. Consider it an early inheritance. And then you're going to sell this house and move in with us where we can keep an eye on your finances. And if I refuse—" Lily's smile was sharp as a knife. "Then we'll contest your mental competency. An old woman hoarding money, living alone in a big house, clearly not making rational decisions about her future. I'm sure we could find a doctor who would agree that you need a guardian to manage your affairs." The room spun slightly as the full weight of her threat hit me. She wasn't just after my house anymore. She wanted everything: my independence, my money, my dignity. She wanted to turn me into a puppet just like she'd done with Jacob. But there was something Lily didn't know, something I hadn't told them yet. The $800,000 she was so excited about, that wasn't even half of what I actually had. I need some time to think about this, I said carefully. You have until tomorrow morning, Lily said, standing and gathering up the bank statements. We'll be back at 900 sharp, and we're going straight to the bank. No more games, no more delays. After they left, I sat in my empty house listening to the silence, but for the first time in years, it wasn't a lonely silence. It was the quiet before the storm. I had work to do. That evening, I didn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea, staring at the phone and gathering my courage. At precisely 11:10 p.m., I finally dialed the number I had memorized but never used. "Detective Santos," came the crisp voice on the other end. "This is Pamela Walker. I believe Officer David from First National Bank called you today." There was a pause, then a rustling of papers. "Mrs. Walker, yes, he said you were in distress at the bank. Mentioned financial elder abuse. Are you safe right now?" "For now, but I need to file a formal report. Can you come to my house?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Detective Rebecca Santos was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of myself at that age. She listened without interruption as I told her everything, starting with Lily's ultimatum at the bank and ending with today's threats about my mental competency. "Do you have any recordings of these threats?" she asked, taking notes. "No, but I can get them." She looked up sharply. "Mrs. Walker, I need to be very clear about something. If you're planning to record conversations with your family members, you need to understand the legal implications. In this state, you can record conversations you're part of without the other party's consent, but anything you record could potentially be used in court. I understand. Are you prepared for that possibility? Because once you start down this path, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son and daughter-in-law will never be the same." I thought about Jacob's tired face, his defeated posture, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Detective, my relationship with my son is already gone. Lily destroyed it piece by piece over 3 years. At least this way. Maybe I can help him see what she really is." She nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Time, and maybe some advice on how to protect my assets." After Detective Santos left, I went to my sewing room and sat down at the antique Singer machine that Richard had bought me for our 10th anniversary. This room was my sanctuary, filled with bolts of silk and lace, pattern books, and half-finished projects for my wealthy clients. But tonight, I wasn't here to sew. I was here to plan. I called Gregory Bennett, an attorney who specialized in elder law. One of my clients had recommended him years ago, and I had saved his card, never thinking I would need it. "Mrs. Walker," he said when I explained my situation, "I'm glad you called. What your daughter-in-law is attempting is textbook financial elder abuse. We need to act quickly to protect your assets." He explained the steps we needed to take, securing my accounts with special passwords and security measures, preparing a new will with ironclad provisions, documenting all interactions with Lily and Jacob. "And most importantly," he added, "we need to gather evidence of coercion. If you can record her making these threats, we'll have a much stronger case." By dawn, I had a comprehensive plan in place. I had spoken with my bank manager at Riverside Community Bank, alerted him to the potential for fraud, and changed all my account access protocols. I had emailed Mr. Bennett the documents he needed to begin drafting a new will, and I had prepared for Lily and Jacob's visit. But there was one more thing I needed to do. I went back to my closet and opened the hidden safe again. This time, I removed a second manila folder, one I hadn't shown to Lily and Jacob. Inside were the real financial statements, the complete record of my success. The $847,000 I had revealed to them was just my operating capital, the money I kept liquid for materials and business expenses. My actual net worth was closer to $1.9 million, accumulated over 2 decades of discreet service to the wealthiest families in the city. As I looked at the figures, I felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow. Pride in what I had accomplished on my own, starting with nothing but skill and determination. Sorrow that I had kept it hidden from the person I loved most in the world, my son. But perhaps it wasn't too late to save him. At 8:30 the next morning, I heard Lily's car pull into my driveway. I was ready, dressed in a simple blue dress that I had made myself, my hair neatly arranged, looking every inch the modest, aging seamstress they expected. The small digital recorder Detective Santos had given me was hidden in my cardigan pocket. On my kitchen counter, spread out like bait, were the bank statements from yesterday, along with a few additional documents I had selected very carefully. "Good morning," I said as I opened the door, my voice trembling just enough to sound convincingly fragile. Lily brushed past me without a greeting, her eyes immediately scanning the kitchen for the papers. "I see you've been thinking overnight. Good. I hope you've come to your senses." Jacob followed more slowly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" "You look tired." "I didn't sleep very well," I admitted, which was true enough. "This is all very overwhelming." Lily was already examining the documents on the counter. "What's this?" she asked, holding up a letter from Caldwell Estate Management. "Elizabeth Caldwell wants to commission me for her granddaughter's debutante season. $35,000 for a complete wardrobe." I watched Lily's eyes widen as she read the letter. The commission was real, but I had brought it out for a specific reason. I wanted her to understand exactly how much money was involved in my work. $35,000, she repeated slowly. "For clothes. For couture," I corrected again. "Elizabeth's granddaughter is being presented at the Magnolia Ball next spring. It's the social event of the season." Lily set the letter down with shaking hands. I could see her recalculating, realizing that my hidden wealth wasn't just savings from past work, but ongoing income from current projects. "How many clients do you have like this?" she asked. "Enough to stay very comfortable." That was when I saw it. The exact moment when Lily's mask finally slipped completely. The greed in her eyes was so naked, so hungry, it made my stomach turn. "Well," she said, attempting to regain her composure, "this just confirms what we discussed yesterday. You clearly need help managing all of this money. It's irresponsible for someone your age to be handling such large sums alone. I've been managing it just fine for 22 years. Times change. Pamela, you're getting older, more forgetful. What happens if you make a mistake? What happens if someone takes advantage of you?" The irony of her words would have been funny if it weren't so cruel. Jacob shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe Lily has a point. This is a lot of money to keep track of." I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt my heart break a little more. "Jacob, do you really think I'm incompetent?" He couldn't meet my eyes. I think you need help. We all need help sometimes. And you think Lily should be the one to help me. I think we should work together as a family." Lily moved closer to me, her voice taking on that false sweetness again. "Pamela, we're not asking you to give up everything. We just want to make sure you're protected. What if something happens to you? What if you get sick? Wouldn't you rather know that responsible people are looking after your interests? People like your family." Yes, I reached into my cardigan pocket and pressed the record button on the device. "And what exactly would this protection involve?" Lily began outlining her plan with the enthusiasm of someone who had been thinking about nothing else all night. I would transfer $500,000 to a joint account that she and Jacob would manage. I would sell the house and move into their spare bedroom. I would stop taking on new clients and gradually wind down my business. "But what about my independence?" I asked. "Independence is overrated at your age," Lily said dismissively. "What you need is security, and you'll provide that security. Of course. Of course. We're family." As she spoke, I noticed something that chilled me to the bone. She kept saying we and family, but when she thought Jacob wasn't looking, her expressions were purely calculating. This wasn't about family at all. This was about money, pure and simple. "There's something else," Lily continued, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper. "I've been doing some research on elder care law. Did you know that in this state, if an elderly person is deemed unable to make rational financial decisions, Their children can petition for conservatorship. My blood ran cold. Conservatorship. It's really for your own protection, she said, but her smile was predatory. If you were to become confused about your finances, Jacob could step in and make sure your money is handled properly. You mean you could step in? Lily's mask slipped again for just a moment. I mean, your family could step in. I looked at Jacob, hoping against hope that he would speak up, would defend me, would show some sign of the boy I had raised. But he just stood there, staring at the floor, completely under her spell. What if I refuse? I asked quietly. Lily's voice turned cold. Then we'll have to consider other options. Maybe you're already more confused than we realized. Maybe you're not competent to make these decisions anymore. The threat was crystal clear. Agree to her terms or she would have me declared mentally incompetent and take control of everything anyway. But there was still something she didn't know. Something that would change everything when I finally revealed it. I need to use the bathroom, I said, standing slowly and reaching for my cane. Of course, Lily said magnanimously. Take your time. We're not going anywhere. In the bathroom, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Detective Santos. It's happening now. Recording everything. Send backup. Her response came immediately. Stay calm. Help is coming. When I returned to the kitchen, Lily had the bank statement spread out again and was making notes on a legal pad she'd produced from her purse. I've been thinking, she said without looking up, and I've decided we should move faster than originally planned. Today we'll transfer the money and put the house on the market. Tomorrow we can start looking at care facilities. Care facilities. Just to see what's available for the future. But I could see in her eyes that she meant immediately. She wanted me warehoused somewhere she could control me completely. Lily, I said carefully, there's something else I need to tell you. She looked up from her notes, impatience flickering across her features. What now? The $800,000 you saw yesterday. That's not all of it. The pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the table. What do you mean? I mean, I have other accounts, other investments. The $800,000 is just what I keep readily accessible. Jacob finally looked up from the floor. Mom, how much money do you actually have? I smiled, and for the first time in days, it was genuine. Enough to make sure I never have to depend on anyone ever again. Lily's face went white, then red, then a mottled combination of both. You lying, manipulative old witch, she hissed, her careful facade finally crumbling completely. How dare you sit there playing games with us? I'm not playing games. Lily, I'm protecting myself. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Fine, if that's how you want to play this, then we'll do it the hard way. Jacob, call Dr. Harrison. Tell him we need an emergency psychiatric evaluation for your mother. That's when I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. Cars pulling into my driveway. Multiple cars. Actually, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the recording device. I think we need to have a different kind of conversation entirely. The look on Lily's face when she saw the recording device in my hand was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Pure shock mixed with rage and the dawning realization that she had been outmaneuvered by the old woman she'd been systematically underestimating. What is that? She demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Evidence, I said simply, holding up the small device. Every threat you've made, every manipulation, every cruel word, it's all recorded. The sound of car doors slamming in my driveway grew louder. Through the kitchen window, I could see Detective Santos approaching with 2 uniformed officers, but Lily was too focused on the recorder to notice. You can't do that, she snarled, lunging toward me. That's illegal. You can't record people without their permission. Actually, I said, stepping back and keeping the device out of her reach. In this state, I can record any conversation I'm part of. Detective Santos explained the law to me very thoroughly last night. Jacob looked confused and frightened. Mom, what's going on? Why are there police cars outside? Before I could answer, there was a firm knock at my front door. Mrs. Walker, Detective Santos called. It's Detective Santos. You asked me to come by. Lily's face went from red to white in an instant. I walked slowly to the front door, my cane tapping against the hardwood floor. behind me. I could hear Lily whispering frantically to Jacob, but I couldn't make out the words. "Detective?" I said, opening the door wide. Perfect timing. Detective Santos stepped inside, followed by Officers Rodriguez and Chen. Her sharp eyes immediately took in the scene, the scattered bank statements on the kitchen table, Lily's flushed face, Jacob's obvious confusion. "Mrs. Walker, are you all right?" she asked. "I am now," I replied. "I have that recording we discussed." Lily finally found her voice. "This is harassment. You can't just bring police into someone's home without a warrant." Detective Santos turned her attention to Lily, her expression professionally neutral. "Ma'am, Mrs. Walker called us here. She's reporting financial elder abuse and threats of forced conservatorship. Are you Lily Foster Walker?" "It's Lily Foster Walker," Lily corrected automatically, then seemed to realize she'd just confirmed her identity. "And you're Mrs. Walker's daughter-in-law?" "Yes, but this is all a misunderstanding. We're just trying to help her manage her finances. She's getting older, and we're concerned about her ability to make sound decisions." I held up the recording device. "Detective, would you like to hear exactly how concerned she is?" For the next 10 minutes, we all stood in my kitchen listening to Lily's voice coming from the small speaker, her threats about mental competency evaluations, her demands for access to my money, her casual cruelty about forcing me into a care facility if I didn't comply. Jacob's face grew paler with each passing minute. When we reached the part where Lily called me a lying, manipulative old witch, he actually flinched. "That's enough," Detective Santos said, switching off the device. She turned to Lily, her expression no longer neutral. "Ma'am, what I just heard constitutes financial elder abuse under state law. You're under arrest." "Under arrest?" Lily's voice rose to a shriek. "For what?" "For trying to help my husband's mother. For attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person, making threats to force conservatorship for financial gain, and psychological abuse of a vulnerable adult." As Officer Rodriguez began reading Lily her rights, she turned desperately to Jacob. "Do something, don't just stand there. She's your mother." But Jacob was staring at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a child caught in a lie. "Mom," he whispered, "is this really what's been happening? Has Lily been threatening you, trying to steal your money, treating you like a burden to be disposed of?" "Yes, sweetheart. For 3 years. His shoulders slumped. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was this bad." Detective Santos had finished with Lily and was now focusing on him. "Mr. Walker, I need to ask you some questions. Were you aware of your wife's plans to force your mother into conservatorship?" Jacob looked lost, confused, like a man waking up from a long nightmare. She said Mom needed help, that she was getting forgetful and couldn't handle her finances anymore. I thought we were helping." "Did you know about the threats? The ultimatums?" "No." His voice was barely audible. "I knew Lily could be direct, but I didn't know she was threatening Mom. I wanted to feel sorry for him, but I couldn't quite manage it. Not yet." "Jacob, you were there at the bank yesterday. You heard what she said. I thought she was just frustrated. She gets frustrated sometimes when people don't listen to her advice." Officer Chen, who had been taking notes, looked up. "Mr. Walker, threatening to have someone declared mentally incompetent for financial gain isn't advice. It's a crime." As they led Lily toward the door, she turned back to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "This isn't over, you vindictive old woman. I'll fight this. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." "Actually," I said calmly, "I think it's time everyone knew exactly what kind of person we both really are." I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up a manila folder I had placed there earlier that morning. "Detective Santos, I think you'll find these documents very interesting." I opened the folder and spread out its contents on the table. Bank statements, investment records, property deeds, but not just mine. "What is this?" Detective Santos asked, leaning over the papers. "Evidence that Mrs. Lily Foster Walker has been doing this before. 2 other elderly family members." Lily stopped struggling against Officer Rodriguez's grip. "That's impossible. You don't have access to my financial records." I smiled. "No, but I have access to something better. I have access to the same social circles as your victims." The room fell silent as I explained what I had discovered during my sleepless night of research. Elizabeth Caldwell, my longtime client, had mentioned in passing months ago that her elderly aunt had been manipulated by a young woman who married into the family. The aunt had lost her house and life savings before other relatives intervened. "I called Elizabeth last night," I continued. "She put me in touch with the aunt's attorney, and the attorney put me in touch with 2 other families who had similar experiences, all involving a young blonde woman named Lily Foster, who targeted elderly family members with assets." Detective Santos was studying the documents with increasing interest. "These show a pattern of financial exploitation going back 7 years. 7 years and 4 different victims," I confirmed. "All elderly, all manipulated into signing over their assets to relatives who were either married to or romantically involved with Lily Foster." Jacob looked like he was going to be sick. "Mom, are you saying that she married me just to get to your money?" I looked at my son, this man I had loved and protected and sacrificed for, and felt my heart break for him. "I'm saying she saw an opportunity and took it. You were never the target, sweetheart. I was." "But we've been married for 3 years. If she was just after money, why wait so long?" "Because she had to make sure there was money to go after first. She spent 3 years learning about my finances, figuring out exactly how much I was worth, and she spent 3 years isolating you from me, making sure you would side with her when the time came." Officer Chen had been reading through the case files from the other families. "Mrs. Walker, these other cases, the pattern is identical. Marriage or romantic relationship, gradual isolation of the elderly target, escalating financial demands, and finally threats of conservatorship if the victim doesn't comply." "How did the other cases end?" Detective Santos asked. 2 of the victims died before the cases could be resolved. One lost everything but was eventually able to prove fraud and recover some assets. I paused, looking directly at Lily. "The 4th case is still ongoing. A 92-year-old man in Connecticut whose nephew's girlfriend convinced him to sign over his house last month." Lily's face had gone completely white. "This is insane. You're making all of this up." "Actually," Detective Santos said, pulling out her phone, "I'm going to need to make some calls. Mrs. Walker, would you be willing to cooperate with investigators in other jurisdictions?" "Of course." As they finally led Lily away, she turned back one last time. Jacob, don't let them do this. I'm your wife." But Jacob didn't answer. He was sitting at my kitchen table with his head in his hands, staring at the evidence of his wife's systematic manipulation of our family. "Mom," he said without looking up, "how long have you known?" "I suspected for months, but I only had proof as of last night." "Why didn't you tell me?" I sat down across from him, the same table where I had fed him breakfast before school for 10 years, where we had done homework together, where we had planned his future. "Because I hoped I was wrong. Because I didn't want to destroy your marriage if there was any chance I was mistaken. And because—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me." He finally looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I wouldn't have believed you a week ago. If you had told me all this, I would have thought you were the one losing your mind. And now I realize I've been losing mine for 3 years. I've been living in some kind of fog, letting her make all the decisions, believing everything she told me about you, about our family, about what was best for everyone." Detective Santos reappeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Walker, we're going to need you to come to the station to make a formal statement, and Mr. Walker will need to speak with you as well." After they left, Jacob and I sat in my kitchen in silence. The bank statements were still scattered across the table, evidence of the life I had built in secret, the independence I had fought so hard to protect. "Mom," Jacob said finally, "can you ever forgive me?" I reached across the table and took his hand, noting how thin it had become, how the wedding ring hung loose on his finger. "Sweetheart, there's nothing to forgive. You were manipulated by an expert. She made you believe that caring for me meant controlling me. But I should have seen it. I should have known. She spent 3 years making sure you wouldn't see it. That's what she does. That's her skill. He squeezed my hand. What happens now? I looked around my kitchen, my home, the life I had nearly lost. Now we rebuild, both of us. But even as I said the words, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. Because Lily had been right about one thing. This wasn't over. People like her don't give up easily, and she still had cards to play that I hadn't seen yet. 3 months passed like a slow-moving river after Lily's arrest. The criminal case against her was proceeding through the legal system, with Detective Santos keeping me updated on each development. Lily had been released on bail with a restraining order prohibiting her from coming within 500 feet of my property or contacting me in any way. But the aftermath of her deception continued to ripple through our lives. Jacob had moved out of the house he shared with Lily and into a small apartment across town. He had taken a leave of absence from his job at her father's company, unsure if he could ever return to a place so closely tied to the woman who had systematically dismantled his life. Most days, he looked like a man who had awakened from a 3-year coma, disoriented and struggling to reconnect with the world. He was thin, pale, and carried himself with a wariness that broke my heart. My once confident son now second-guessed every decision, from what to eat for breakfast to which shirt to wear. We were seeing each other regularly now, twice a week for dinner at my house, but there was a fragility to our relationship that hadn't been there before. Neither of us quite knew how to navigate this new landscape of betrayal and recovery. "You've hardly touched your food," I said one evening in late October as we sat at my kitchen table. I had made his favorite meal, meatloaf with mashed potatoes, hoping to coax some of his appetite back. Jacob pushed a potato around his plate. "I'm not very hungry these days." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "You need to eat, sweetheart. You're still losing weight." "I know," he sighed, forcing himself to take a bite. "Dr. Wilson says my appetite will come back eventually, part of the recovery process." Dr. Maya Wilson was the family therapist Jacob had started seeing at Detective Santos's recommendation. A specialist in helping people recover from manipulative relationships, she had become an essential part of his healing journey. "What else does Dr. Wilson say?" I asked gently. Jacob set down his fork. "She says I need to talk to you, about everything, about what happened during those 3 years with Lily." I waited, giving him the space to continue at his own pace. "Mom, I owe you an explanation, an apology. But I'm not even sure where to begin." "You don't owe me anything, Jacob. You were as much a victim as I was." He shook his head firmly. "No, I was complicit. I stood by while she threatened you, isolated you, tried to take everything from you. I need you to understand why. Not to excuse it, but to explain it." I poured us both some tea, sensing this would be a long conversation. "I'm listening." Jacob took a deep breath. "It started so gradually I barely noticed. At first, Lily was just concerned about you, or so I thought. She would point out small things. 'Your mother looks tired today,' or 'Did you notice your mom forgot where she put her keys?' Little comments that seemed caring. He stared into his tea as if the memories were floating on its surface. Then it escalated. She started suggesting you were becoming forgetful, that you might need help managing your finances. When I defended you, she would get upset, accuse me of not caring about your well-being. Classic manipulation tactics," I said softly. "But that wasn't all." Jacob's voice dropped to a whisper. "About a year into our marriage, I started having trouble sleeping. Anxiety. Lily said. She brought home pills from her doctor friend. Said they would help. I felt a chill run through me. What kind of pills? Benzodiazepines, Dr. Wilson says anxiety medication, but in doses that were way too high. They made me foggy, compliant. When I tried to stop taking them, I'd get terrible withdrawal symptoms, shaking, panic attacks, confusion. Lily convinced me I had developed a serious anxiety disorder and needed the medication to function. My hands trembled as I set down my teacup. Jacob, that's why I looked so awful. Mom, why I lost weight. Why I seemed so absent. I was being drugged. Dr. Wilson thinks Lily was slowly poisoning me to keep me dependent and malleable. Anger unlike anything I'd ever felt surged through me. This woman hadn't just tried to steal my money and my home. She had been systematically destroying my son from the inside out. "Have you told Detective Santos about this?" I asked, working to keep my voice steady. He nodded. "Last week. They're adding it to the charges against her. Drugging someone without their knowledge or consent is a serious crime." "Oh, Jacob." I moved to his side of the table and wrapped my arms around him. He felt so fragile, like the 8-year-old boy who had clung to me at his father's funeral. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening." "How could you? I didn't even see it myself until it was almost too late." He leaned into my embrace. "Dr. Wilson says Lily shows all the classic signs of being a sociopath. No empathy, expert manipulation, complete focus on what she wants without regard for others. She's done this before. Mom, I wasn't her first victim, and I wouldn't have been her last." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of his confession hanging in the air between us. "I'm angry," I finally admitted. "Not at you, never at you, but at her, at what she did to you, to us." "I'm angry too," Jacob said, "but mostly at myself, for being so blind." "Dr. Wilson is right. Lily is a skilled manipulator. She knew exactly what she was doing." Jacob pulled back slightly, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Can we ever fix this? Mom, can we ever get back what we had before?" I cupped his face in my hands, the way I used to when he was a child with a scraped knee or a broken toy. "We won't get back what we had before, but maybe we can build something new, something stronger. How do we start? One day at a time, one honest conversation at a time." In the weeks that followed, Jacob and I established a new routine: Sunday dinners at my house, Wednesday afternoon walks in the park, small, consistent moments of reconnection. We talked about everything and nothing: his childhood memories, my sewing business, books we were reading, movies we wanted to see. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to regain his footing in the world. The hollowness in his cheeks filled out as his appetite returned. The faraway look in his eyes gradually gave way to clarity and focus. He even started looking for a new job, something completely different from the corporate finance position he'd held at Lily's father's company. "I'm thinking about teaching," he told me one Sunday as we cleared the dinner dishes. "High school economics. Helping young people understand money before someone like Lily can take advantage of them." I smiled, seeing a spark of the old Jacob returning. "I think you'd be an excellent teacher. Dr. Wilson suggested we attend some therapy sessions together, which proved to be challenging but healing. There were difficult conversations about why I had kept my financial success a secret from him for so many years, about the ways we had both enabled Lily's manipulation through our silence and assumptions. "I thought I was protecting you," I admitted during one particularly emotional session. "By not telling you about the money, I thought I was letting you find your own way without the burden of my expectations." "And I thought I was protecting you by going along with Lily's plans," Jacob responded. "I believed she had your best interests at heart, that she knew better than I did what an aging parent needs." Dr. Wilson leaned forward. "The irony is that in trying to protect each other, you both created the perfect environment for someone like Lily to exploit. Secrets, even well-intentioned ones. Create vulnerabilities." It was a painful truth, but one we needed to hear. By the time winter settled over the city, Jacob had begun to rebuild his life. He had enrolled in a teaching certification program, found a better apartment, and even gone on a few casual dates. Nothing serious, just baby steps toward reclaiming his independence and identity. I too was finding a new rhythm, balancing my continued work as a seamstress with the legal proceedings against Lily and my renewed relationship with my son. For the first time in years, I felt fully present in my own life, no longer hiding parts of myself from the people I loved. Then came the phone call that reminded us both that our story wasn't finished yet. It was a gray Tuesday afternoon in early February when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Mrs. Walker." The voice was young, female, nervous. "This is Sarah Thompson. I got your number from Detective Santos. She said you might be able to help me." I set down the silk I was hemming. "What kind of help do you need?" "Dear, It's my grandmother. Her boyfriend's daughter is trying to get her to sign over her house. She's saying Grandma is too old to live alone, that she needs to move into assisted living. But Grandma is fine. She's sharper than I am most days. A chill ran down my spine, the scenario eerily familiar. What's the daughter's name? There was a pause. Laura Reynolds. Do you know her? The name wasn't familiar, but something in my gut told me this wasn't a coincidence. Where is your grandmother now? She's staying with me for a few days. She's scared to go home because Laura keeps showing up with papers to sign. Bring her to my house tomorrow at 2:00 and bring any documents Laura has given her. After I hung up, I called Detective Santos. Lily had been released on bail 3 months ago pending trial, with a restraining order that prohibited her from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. But restraining orders, I was learning, were just pieces of paper. She's targeting someone else, I told the detective when she answered, using a different name. I was afraid of this, Santos sighed. Her lawyer has been pushing for a plea deal, claiming she was just trying to help family members manage their finances. If she's moved on to a new victim, it proves this was never about helping family. It proves it's a pattern. Detective Santos was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Walker, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Would you be willing to help us set up a sting operation? The next afternoon, Mrs. Eleanor Thompson sat in my living room looking remarkably like I had 3 months earlier. She was 82 years old with silver hair and worried eyes, clutching a manila folder full of papers that Laura Reynolds had been pressuring her to sign. Her granddaughter, Sarah, a woman in her 30s with her grandmother's kind eyes and determined chin, sat beside her, holding her hand. She seemed so nice at first, Mrs. Thompson was saying. When Jimmy started dating her, she would come over for dinner and compliment my cooking. She even helped me with my garden last spring. That's how it starts, I said gently. She studies you, learns what you need to hear, what will make you trust her. But then Jimmy started changing. He stopped calling as often, stopped visiting unless she was with him, and she started making comments about how big the house was for just one person, how expensive it must be to maintain. I nodded, remembering similar conversations with Jacob. What did she want you to sign? Sarah asked. Sarah spread the papers out on my coffee table, a power of attorney giving Jimmy control over Eleanor's finances, transfer of the house deed to a trust that Laura would manage, and an appointment for a cognitive evaluation with a local psychiatrist. The same playbook, I murmured. Eleanor, has she ever threatened you directly? The older woman's hands trembled slightly. She said if I didn't cooperate, if I kept being difficult, I might end up in a state facility instead of the nice private assisted living place she picked out. She said Jimmy was tired of worrying about me and just wanted what was best. Did Jimmy say that? Not in those words, but he's been so distant lately, so impatient with me. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am becoming a burden. I reached over and took her hand. Eleanor, you are not a burden. You are a target. There's a difference. Over the next hour, I told her my story. About Lily's 3-year campaign against me, about the threats and manipulation, about how she had nearly succeeded in taking everything I had worked for. But how did you fight back? Sarah asked. I documented everything. I gathered evidence and I reached out for help. I explained Detective Santos's plan. They wanted to catch Lily, or Laura, as she was now calling herself, in the act of threatening an elderly victim. But they needed cooperation from someone she was actively targeting. Eleanor would wear a recording device during her next meeting with Laura and Jimmy. The police would be nearby, ready to intervene if the situation escalated. What if something goes wrong? Eleanor asked. Then you signal us and we end it immediately. But Eleanor, if we don't stop her now, she'll just move on to the next victim and the next. Mrs. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, staring at the papers scattered across my table. Finally, she looked up with a determination that reminded me of myself 3 months ago. What do I need to do? 2 days later, I sat in an unmarked police van parked 3 blocks from Eleanor Thompson's house, listening through headphones as Lily's voice came through crystal clear on the recording equipment. Eleanor, you're being very stubborn about this, Lily was saying, her tone still sweet, but with that familiar edge of impatience. Jimmy and I are trying to help you. I don't understand why I need to sign all these papers right now, Eleanor replied, her voice shaky but determined. Because you're not getting any younger, and we need to make sure your affairs are in order. What happens if you fall and break a hip? What happens if you have a stroke? Who's going to take care of everything? I have Sarah. I have other family. Lily's laugh was cold. Sarah has her own life, her own problems. She can't drop everything to take care of an old woman who's too stubborn to accept help. Through the surveillance equipment, I could see into Eleanor's living room. Lily, or Laura, as she was calling herself now, had dyed her honey blonde hair a dark brunette and was wearing glasses. But it was unmistakably her. She was leaning forward aggressively, while Jimmy, Eleanor's grandson, sat off to the side, looking uncomfortable but not intervening. The dynamic was heartbreakingly familiar. If you don't sign these papers, Lily continued, Jimmy and I won't be able to help you anymore. You'll be on your own. Do you understand what that means for someone your age? Are you threatening me? Eleanor asked, her voice stronger now. I'm explaining reality to you. You can either cooperate with people who care about you, or you can be difficult and face the consequences. Detective Santos, sitting beside me in the van, spoke into her radio. That's enough. Move in. Within minutes, police officers were at Eleanor's door. Through the surveillance feed, I watched Lily's face transform from confident manipulation to shocked disbelief as Detective Santos placed her under arrest for violating her restraining order and attempting to financially exploit another elderly victim. Jimmy looked confused and frightened as officers explained that his girlfriend was part of an ongoing investigation into elder abuse. But she was just trying to help, he kept saying. She said Grandma needed assistance managing her money. Son, Detective Santos said gently, your girlfriend has been doing this for years. Your grandmother is her fifth known victim. 3 weeks later, Lily pleaded guilty to multiple counts of financial elder abuse across 4 states. The plea deal included restitution to her victims and a 10-year prison sentence. Her lawyer had advised her that going to trial would likely result in a much longer sentence given the evidence against her. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. I had said everything I needed to say in my victim impact statement, which the prosecutor read aloud in court. Instead, I spent that day in my sewing room working on a christening gown for Elizabeth Caldwell's new great-granddaughter. Jacob came to see me that evening, as he had been doing twice a week since Lily's arrest. The divorce had been finalized a month ago, and he was slowly rebuilding his life. He had lost weight, but the good kind this time, the kind that comes from eating regular meals and sleeping through the night again. How are you feeling? He asked, settling into the chair beside my sewing table. Free, I said simply. For the first time in 3 years, completely free. He was quiet for a moment, watching me work. Mom, I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. I set down my needle and gave him my full attention. I know you've forgiven me. I know you've said there's nothing to forgive, but I need to forgive myself. And I can't do that without acknowledging what I allowed to happen. He took a deep breath. I let someone convince me that loving you meant controlling you. I let her make me believe that your independence was stubbornness, that your strength was confusion, that your wisdom was senility. Tears were beginning to form in his eyes. I forgot who raised me. I forgot who taught me right from wrong, who worked 3 jobs to put me through school, who sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. I forgot that you're the strongest person I know. Jacob, please. Please let me finish. I want to ask you something, and I want you to feel completely free to say no. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. I want to give you something that belongs to you. He opened the box to reveal my mother's wedding ring, the one I had given him when he got engaged to Lily. This should never have left your finger, he said. Lily wanted to reset the diamond, use it in her engagement ring. I should have said no then. I should have realized that someone who wanted to erase your history wasn't worthy of joining our family. I took the ring from the box, feeling its familiar weight. My mother had worn it for 47 years. I had worn it for 31 years after Richard died, until the day I gave it to Jacob as a symbol of new beginnings. Do you want me to wear it again? I asked. I want you to do whatever makes you happy. If you want to wear it, wear it. If you want to save it for someone else someday, save it. If you want to sell it and use the money for a cruise around the world, do that. It's yours. Mom, everything should be yours to decide. I slipped the ring onto my finger where it belonged. Thank you. There's something else, he said. I've been thinking about what you said about rebuilding our relationship. I want to learn about your business, your real business, not the version I created in my head where you needed rescuing. I smiled. It's not glamorous work, you know, long hours, demanding clients, deadlines that can't be moved. Sounds like something I learned from watching my mother. That weekend, Jacob helped me reorganize my sewing room, setting up a proper office area where I could manage my client appointments and business correspondence. We hung new lighting and installed better storage for my expanding collection of fabrics and patterns. Elizabeth Caldwell called today, I told him as we worked. She wants to commission a suit for her husband's inauguration as chairman of the hospital board. $8,000 for one suit. For one suit? Jacob looked incredulous. For one perfect suit made exactly to his measurements in fabric that cost $400 a yard. I held up a swatch of charcoal gray wool that felt like silk. When you're paying this much, perfection is the minimum expectation. He examined the fabric, running it between his fingers. And you've been doing this for 22 years. 22 years and 2 months? No wonder you could afford to help me through college. That was just the beginning. The real money came later when I had established clients who trusted me with their most important occasions. As we worked, I told him about my plans for the future. I was considering taking on an apprentice, someone young who could learn the traditional techniques that were becoming lost arts. I was also thinking about teaching a few select classes, sharing my knowledge with others who wanted to learn couture sewing. What about retirement? He asked. Retirement from what? This isn't just my job. Sweetheart, it's my art, my passion, my purpose. I'll do this as long as my eyes can see the stitches and my hands can hold a needle. 6 months after Lily's sentencing, I received a letter that surprised me. It was from Eleanor Thompson's granddaughter, Sarah, inviting me to Eleanor's 83rd birthday party. Grandma insists that you're the reason she's still living in her own house, Sarah wrote. She says you taught her that being older doesn't mean being powerless. I attended the party, held in Eleanor's beautiful garden that she still maintained herself. She introduced me to her friends as the woman who saved my life, which embarrassed me but also filled me with a deep sense of satisfaction. You know, Eleanor said as we sat together watching her great-grandchildren play in the yard, I've been thinking about what you said about how Lily studied us to learn our weaknesses. What about it? I think we should study back, learn to recognize the signs, teach other people what to watch for. She turned to me with bright, determined eyes. What would you think about starting a support group for people who've been through what we went through? The idea intrigued me. What would we call it? Eleanor smiled. How about the Survivors Club, 3 months later? Our first meeting was held in the community room at the local library. 12 elderly people attended, each with their own story of financial manipulation, family betrayal, or attempted elder abuse. Some had escaped, like Eleanor and me. Others had lost everything but were trying to rebuild their lives. Detective Santos came to speak to the group about recognizing warning signs and legal protections available to seniors. Gregory Bennett, my attorney who specialized in elder law, volunteered to provide free consultations. A financial advisor offered workshops on protecting assets from predatory family members. But mostly we talked. We shared our stories, our fears, our victories. We created a network of people who understood what it felt like to be targeted by those who should have loved and protected us. I never intended to become an advocate. I had only wanted to protect my own independence, my own hard-earned security. But sometimes life has other plans. Jacob supported my new mission wholeheartedly. He had completed his teaching certification and found a position at a local high school teaching economics and personal finance. He had a special focus on helping young people understand financial manipulation and exploitation, lessons he had learned the hard way. I'm proud of you, Mom, he told me one evening as we left a Survivors Club meeting together. You turned something terrible into something that helps others. I had a good example, I replied, squeezing his hand. A certain young man who didn't let a terrible experience define him. He smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that reminded me so much of his father. We make a good team, don't we? The best, I agreed. On a quiet Sunday evening a year after Lily's conviction, I sat in my kitchen reading thank you notes from the women whose lives had been touched by our support group. Mrs. Patterson, whose nephew had tried to steal her house, had successfully fought back with our help and legal advice. Mrs. Rodriguez had escaped an abusive living situation arranged by her daughter-in-law. Mr. Chen had learned to recognize the signs when his son's girlfriend started pressuring him to change his will. Jacob stopped by as he did every Sunday now, bringing groceries and staying for dinner. Our relationship was different than it had been before Lily, deeper in some ways. We both knew how easily it could have been lost forever. "Any regrets?" he asked as we cleaned up the dishes together. I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret the 3 years of manipulation and abuse, the fear, the isolation, the near loss of everything I had worked for? No, I said finally, because it led me here, to this work, to helping other people, to understanding my own strength in a way I never had before. The Survivors Club had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We now had chapters in 3 neighboring cities, a website with resources for seniors facing financial exploitation, and a hotline staffed by volunteers who had been through similar experiences. Gregory Bennett had helped us establish a legal defense fund for elderly victims who couldn't afford to fight back against predatory family members. Detective Santos had used our group as a model for a new police training program on recognizing and responding to elder abuse. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was the change I saw in our members, and people who had come to us broken and ashamed were now standing tall, reclaiming their dignity and their right to self-determination. "You've built something important, Mom," Jacob said as we sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "We've built it together," I corrected him. "All of us who refused to be victims." Later that evening, after Jacob had gone home, I went to my sewing room and opened the window to let in the cool night air. The scent of the roses Richard had planted so long ago drifted up from the garden. I looked around at the space that had been my secret sanctuary for so many years, now transformed into a bright, efficient workspace where I could share my skills with others. Next week, I would begin teaching my first formal class in couture techniques to a group of 6 women eager to learn the art I had practiced in silence for so long. I ran my fingers over the silk fabric I was currently working with, a luminous ivory for a wedding dress commissioned by Elizabeth Caldwell's granddaughter. My mother's wedding ring caught the light, the familiar weight on my finger, a reminder of all the women who had taught me strength and resilience. I looked around my kitchen, my home, the life I had nearly lost. Everything was exactly as it should be. My savings account was secure, my business was thriving, my independence was unshakable, and I was no longer just Pamela Walker, the seamstress who worked in secret. I was Pamela Walker, survivor, advocate, protector of those who couldn't protect themselves. It was a good life. It was my life. And no one would ever take it from me again. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.